which kept me frantically typing up, talking to various sources, etc. And cat is pretty much out of the bag. Stuttgart released a statement earlier tonight saying that Nick Woltemade is currently on leave to negotiate with a European club. We all know who it is. It's not Bayern Munich, it's Newcastle United. Sources have told me and Transfermarkt, and the story is up on Transfermarkt, that a deal is worth 85 million euros plus 5 million euros in add-ons, to which I say, well played, VfB Stuttgart, because, they essentially refused to take an offer that was 30 million euros less from Bayern Munich early in the summer. Clearly put their foot down, saying, no, that's not a good enough offer. This offer doesn't meet our evaluations. Our evaluation is 70 million euros plus. To be clear, I understood if Bayern Munich had come in with 70 million euros plus add-ons, they would have gotten the player. They refused to meet Stuttgart's evaluation, thinking that they could wait a year, that they would get the player next year for a lower price. And I think this is a rude awakening. I posted a meme saying we're gonna go live to the Tick and Save, which showed an atomic bomb going off, Stefan, because I think there is going to be some people at Bayern Munich that are going to finally come around, that the market realities have shifted a little bit, right? I said to you, I think at the beginning of this transfer saga, when you asked me what is Nick Woltemade worth, I pointed at how much Eintracht Frankfurt got for Hugo Ekitike, and I said that 95 million euros. And I feel vindicated today that I was pretty spot on with my evaluation.
Yeah, it certainly seems so. I think Stuttgart have probably been waiting all summer for a desperate English club to come along and blow Bayern out of the water. It's worth noting that throughout the entire kind of saga with Woltemade and Bayern, we did kind of talk about, I said maybe not a week ago, a week before last, because obviously on holiday we talked about Woltemade and the Bayern deal breaking down, and I said, well, look, I do think selling him this summer is probably Stuttgart's best option, because it didn't seem like there was a lot of other clubs interested. It felt as though Bayern were the only team who were in there desperate to sign him. And obviously that's changed. Newcastle have now come in. They're obviously extremely desperate to sign someone because they expect to probably move Alexander Isak on. They've been linked with a few strikers, but nothing's kind of came through. And, I guess they obviously knew that Stuttgart had been kind of playing cat and mouse with Bayern all summer. And Stuttgart said, right, well, how much did Bayern offer and how much do you want? And they told them, and they said, okay, that's fine. And it's a really interesting move. I mean, I think we've kind of gone back and forth on it, and I think Nick Woltemade is a really interesting player. I think he's a fascinating specimen of an athlete, in the sense he's a very tall guy who can dribble very well. He's obviously got a nickname, Volta Messi, which I'm not sure does him any favors, but anyway. And he has that potential to be a very, very good player. But I do kind of wonder if this is him just kind of being a benefactor of a very desperate transfer window. There's been so many, I was chatting to someone about this at dinner tonight, actually, in the sense there's been so many players who have left the Bundesliga this summer for the Premier League for astronomical sums of money. And on just about every occasion, these players just have not proven themselves. And by that, I mean to the standard that we usually expect players to prove themselves in the Bundesliga before they then go to Bayern, or not Bayern, to the Premier League for record fees. I'm not just talking about Woltemade, I'm talking about Jimmy Gittins, I'm talking about Benjamin Sesko, plenty of other ones as well that could probably rhyme off. And, that's not to say that I don't think Woltemade's a good player, and I don't think he'll be a good player for Newcastle. I think he will, and he should do. But it's crazy. It really is crazy. And you kind of have to wonder, what Bayern are thinking right now, because, they try to play it smart, they try to take it carefully, they didn't rush into anything this summer, and they've been kind of burnt once again by another Premier League club. And it feels like a kind of running theme here, Manu, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, at the end of the day, they thought they could bully Stuttgart into any price that, they were basically giving them. And Stuttgart said no. I think there's a couple of things at play here. I think the economics within the Bundesliga have changed as well. there is now several Bundesliga clubs that run a double-digit million euro surplus on a regular basis, and Stuttgart is among them, right? Eintracht Frankfurt is another. So, they're not desperate enough to sell at any price. They can dictate prices now in a very different way than they did in the past. So, if Bayern Munich come in with a deal that they see below market value, they can simply say no, where in the past they weren't able to. I think the economic
Yeah.
realities of the Premier League are different as well. And then, of course, they can be picky about who to sell and who not to sell. Woltemade is a player that, when I was in Stuttgart and I talked to people, their indication was that we're gonna lose him sooner or later, and we just want to make sure we get the maximum price out of it, and they did, and that's fair play. But I look at Eintracht Frankfurt, and they're very much a model club now, right? And in German football, surpassing Borussia Dortmund on how to operate on the transfer market while still improving the squad every single year. And if I'm Stuttgart and I'm seeing what Frankfurt are doing, and I'm looking at my economic realities in the city that I'm operating, Stuttgart isn't just backed financially by one major car maker, but two. Porsche and Mercedes are each shareholders at VfB Stuttgart. Which other major European club can say that they're backed by two competitive car makers, right? Stuttgart is among them. They have that financial stability and strength, and they really want to utilize that going forward. There's a very well reported story that Rufen Kasper, their CEO of international management at Stuttgart, was also tried to be lured away by Bayern Munich and also said no, right? So I think there's something happening there, and like other clubs, they're trying to maximize their player personnel. As for Nick Woltemade, I actually, initially I thought like, oh no, this is maybe not the right move for him. Like maybe too soon. Maybe the Premier League is not a good landing place. But the more I think about it, Alexander Isak is clearly going now to Liverpool, right? I understand that was the Nick Woltemade camp was pretty much told that much, that Alexander Isak is off to Liverpool. Alexander Isak is actually, when you look at the underlying stats, a really similar player to Nick Woltemade. In fact, if you're looking for a clone, that is pretty much it. If you're looking for the perfect Isak replacement, Woltemade is it. He's not quite at that same level yet, but he's 2 years younger. And in Eddie Howe, he gets to work with a manager who I think is clearly makes the players better. So I actually think, in some ways, this is a perfect landing spot for him. He's going to get play regularly. He's going to play for a manager who has a track record of making players better. He gets to play lots ahead of a World Cup year. He's just nominated for the German national team, right? He is going to be the number 9 striker. And so I think this actually makes a lot of sense for him too, Stefan.
Yeah, I think so too. I think obviously he'll make a lot of money at
Mm.
Newcastle.
A lot
That
more.
goes
Yeah.
without saying. But I think, yeah. um, but I think there's also the aspect of like he's going to a club with a head coach in Eddie Howe, who I think is very good in terms of man management with clubs with players. And he'll obviously slot into a team that desperately need a
Hmm.
striker. And I think that'll be really, really interesting to see how he does. I think he has the physicality to really succeed at the Premier
Yeah.
League. So in that sense, I think he's a really smart player. And as you said, he does kind of tick a lot of the boxes that Alexander Isak does. He can play as that kind of very intimidating physically number 9, but obviously one who can not only kind of go up for headers and win headers and kind of tussle with defenders, but can also kind of turn a defender, run behind the defence. He's got speed. He can dribble with the ball. He can hold the ball up. He's got all those things that should make him a good replacement for Alexander Isak. And I'd be really excited to see what he does in the Premier League. But remarkably, you look at that Stuttgart squad, and you can probably rightfully say, obviously any team will miss Nick Woltemade, but they've got a whole array of forward players there who could and should be quite content with replacing him going forward. And that's the kind of crazy thing about this whole
Yeah.
saga. It's not as if we're not talking about Erling Haaland at Dortmund. We're not talking about Jude Bellingham at Dortmund. We're not talking about, even Xavi Simons at RB Leipzig, where these guys were all fundamentally the main cog in their machines. Woltemade was almost like a kind of, he just a diamond in the rough at
Mhm.
Stuttgart last season, and this kind of unexpected surprise in a team that already has a number of great attacking forward players. So it really is a win-win for Stuttgart in the sense that they'll get to profit
Yeah.
dramatically off of him. But you could argue maybe don't even really need to sign another forward to replace him.
No, I mean maybe the new player is already there, right? Noah David was mentioned, and I mean Dennis Undav can play that role. There's a bunch of young players coming through the academy as well that Stuttgart have pointed out. So this is really the blueprint of how to do it. That you don't necessarily export players that you export good players and get a lot of money for them, but you're trying to not weaken your squad fundamentally. Again, pointing at Eintracht Frankfurt, who've done this really well over the last few years. So yeah, Stuttgart said in their post on their site that a resolution is expected to be announced on Friday. So get the done deal graphics and all that stuff ready, people. This is going to be very quick. All right.